Our next inductee, as in the Pioneer Division, is Scott Busbey from Cape Hatteras, North Carolina. Scott Busbey started surfing in Cocoa Beach at 4th Street South in 65 and 66. His first surfboard was an East Coast West. Now that's a strange name. Purchased at a shop in Satellite Beach for 75 bucks. He grew up in the late 60s, transitioning from longboards to shortboards, and new designs are impossible for a young kid to keep up with. He still went out and bought a longboard, then stripped the glass off and tried to re-glass it. So that's where it all started. And my conversations with Scott was, where he is today was never a lifelong plan. It was not an ambition. He didn't think that this is what I want to do. All the things that happened in his life is simply amazing, and I wish I had more time to tell the story how it all came together, but it all happened by happenstance. And Scott Busbey is one of the most renowned surfboard shapers and builders in the Outer Banks of North Carolina and on the East Coast by happenstance. And it's simply amazing. He started out with his second board that he ever made. They cut down a board with Greg Lohr, used his mother's curtains as the cloth because Greg said that there was fiberglass in those curtains. and then it just went, they got another board and stripped it down, and then he had friends asking him to strip boards down and reshape them. And it kind of just progressed from there, that suddenly he had friends that wanted to have this happen on a regular basis. He had no idea that this was what he wanted to do, and then he met Pete Dooley. Pete Dooley was getting more into the reality of using blanks and things, but he was experimenting, and so everybody was exchanging ideas and learning the processes of making surfboards from the beginning of cutting down old longboards and then progressing, and they learned from each other. Went up to Cape Hatteras, and he and Greg Lohr, I think, were driving garbage trucks, but they went up there because the surf was good. They discovered that, wow, there's a lot more waves up here, more regular than down in Cocoa Beach, Florida. So that's where it all began. When he moved up to Buxton, North Carolina, it was very difficult to find a place to live, and yet he was fortunate enough to find this old Whataburger location that had gas pumps in the front, and it made sense for a shop. And he says, let's try and open up a shop. And his wife, Carol, God's love her soul for putting up with Scott Busbey. One story I heard tonight is that he went surfing one day, and surf was really good, and Carol was left at the shop, and he surfed for about 6 to 8 hours that day, and shows up at the shop, and his wife was there throwing the keys at him and left out the door saying, "Thank you for leaving me here all day." But anyway, that was the progression. It would just happen for Scott Busbey. He does an amazing job with surfboards there in the Outer Banks of North Carolina. And a little tiny town is still a little tiny town. Scott Busbey.
First of all, thanks, Hunter, for introducing me there. It's a long learning process, and I'm still learning today. I still really enjoy every bit of it. I've been very fortunate to meet some people along the way that I've worked with. I'd like to thank my mother. First thing I learned from her was that resin dripped on the concrete floor of your garage does not come up very easily, and it chips up the concrete floor. And she was not very happy about it, but we learned a little bit along the way. I ended up meeting a guy named Rick Holt. He was living in a trailer park down at 16th Street, building a few boards, and got to know him, and we were doing a few things together, and he introduced me to Pete Dooley. Pete was, as he said, Pete was shaping and doing a few things. He had a cardboard factory out behind his house. He used 2x4s, and you put cardboard around it, and you wrap plastic over it so it didn't rain, and you run a wire from your electric cord from the house to run the thing. Is how you would do it. And we did that for a while. And I heard somebody talk earlier about all the snowbirds that come down, and they did, and I got to meet a lot of those guys, and I met somebody named Ted Brantley. He's my friend today. I love him. He took me up to New Jersey with him. That's where he introduced me to Hatteras on the way, first time I ever surfed in Hatteras. And he took me up to New Jersey, and I worked there for a summer for a guy named Chuck Kuhns. And Chuck's where I really got to get into board building and learn a lot. He taught me a lot about the whole process from everything. I had a great summer up there. I met Gary Germain there, surfed with a lot of guys. And then I went back to Florida, hooked back up with Pete. Pete and I started building boards together. We built boards called Pete Dooley S. Busbey Contact. And we had a really good time doing that for a while. And someone else came into our life. His name was George Easley. And with George, we came along with natural art. And like he said, it was Greg that came along a little bit later in natural art, and he introduced us to Tommy Moss and Richard Price, and we built natural arts up in Hatteras for 1 year, and boy, it was great. We had a really good time, did a lot of boards, learned a lot, and then we, for reasons unknown, what we do know, but we had to move the thing back to Florida. I did not want to live back in Florida again. I wanted to live in Hatteras. I moved back up there with my wife, and we didn't think we were going to be doing surfboards or a shop, like he said, but it just turned out that way. I was very fortunate. I met somebody named Lynn Shell. I met somebody named Don Bowers up there. And those two guys there have been like my lifelong friends, and we've learned and worked together and had a lot of fun and surfed a lot of good waves together and built a lot and learning stuff like that, and I'm still with them today. I still learn from them today. I still learn from everybody today. I've got a great guy named Curtis Cromwell that works with me today, and we've moved on, learning about vacuum bagging, learning about resin infusion and stuff like that. We're learning today. I still enjoy it. I would like to thank my wife. She's definitely been the most learning partner that I've had. She's been my partner for 41 years now. She's out snowboarding with my son in Tahoe right now. She's having fun. I don't blame her. She'd rather be there doing that than be here. And I'd like to give a shout out to Mr. Bob Holland. He passed away this year. He was a mentor of mine. I miss him, and I think the world of him. Thank you.